next committee before us this afternoon is Committee of the Whole. And just to note once again that we have all committee members present this afternoon. So the first item, we have a few items before us this afternoon. The first item is Agenda Bill 23073. This is an update on city YouTube channels. And so staff will provide a brief update on the status of the city's use of YouTube in follow-up to direction received at the August 2nd, 2021 work session. And for this item, I know that we have both the Communications Director, Janice Keller, as well as IT Director, Marty Mulholland. So I will turn it over to one of you.
Good afternoon. I'll start us off. And Hannah, can you let me know if my audio is okay? We've been having some challenges in the office today. Great.
We can hear you.
And I'll ask Marty Mulholland, our IT Director, and Alan, our City Attorney, to jump in as needed too. Briefly, since we last updated council, we've made contact with our area YouTube representative, who's the head of government and external relations for the Pacific Northwest region. In his messages, he does not guarantee that future videos are protected from attracting medical misinformation policy violations, or that we will not receive further warnings or strikes. So that's the bad news. The good news is his messages do give us some greater assurance in a couple of ways. One is that YouTube has lifted the content removal decision from the July 12th City Council meeting video. And we've known that for a couple of weeks now. That was reported as well in the newspaper and elsewhere. He also emphasized that YouTube is quite attentive to its educational, documentary, and scientific or artistic content policy, which gives some allowances for public comment at public meetings. So these communications with YouTube's representatives appear to reduce our risk for using our YouTube channels. And now that we have a point of contact, we also feel like we have more avenues if additional warnings or strikes are received. So in light of this, our concerns are reduced. And we plan to proceed as we would have prior to receiving the warning on the July meeting. And we'll keep council posted should we receive further warnings or strikes. And I think just proceed as usual and keep people posted. Marty or Alan, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything. I think that's pretty complete summary.
Same here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any clarifying questions from council? It's fairly straightforward. Okay. Thank you for providing that update. Very appreciative. Councilmember Lilliquist.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. Proceed as usual, go back to the regular way. Does that mean we don't see any immediate risk with resuming public comment during council meetings? Or is that the next discussion?
That's part of the next discussion. I think we will take our cues about that from the city council, but in the meantime, we're prepared to use YouTube as we had prior to July 12th.
But I would say, and we've talked about this internally, is that depending on the outcome of the next item and the discussion that council is going to have, if we resume public comment as we have previously, we increase our risk with YouTube. We definitely do. There's less risk if we have a different model of public comment, which I think is the next agenda item.
Additional questions? I don't want to cut off that discussion, but yeah, definitely more to come, but fairly brief update as far as what we're able to know at this point and what we're expecting to know probably going forward from YouTube. So I appreciate you keeping us posted of that correspondence. If there's nothing further on this item, we will go to, and as people have spoken to, there are a couple of items, I guess, this afternoon that are on or somewhat related, but the next item in our packet is Agenda Bill 23038, and this is a discussion of in-person city meetings. So following discussion at the July 12th City Council meeting and an acknowledgement of the dynamic situation related to the COVID-19 pandemic, The administration is recommending that city meetings continue to be held remotely. And for this, I will turn to Deputy Administrator Brian Heinrich.
Good afternoon, Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review the memo that was in the packet. It's pretty straightforward. As Council President Stone mentioned, we are recommending, the administration is recommending that we continue the remote environment that we're in today and have been in since April of 2020. Perhaps goes without saying that the time span between July 12th and today, in terms of what has occurred on the public health landscape, is vastly different. So we are recommending that we continue for the foreseeable future in a remote meeting environment. And this would apply also to other boards and commissions. In the memo, switching gears just a little bit, we did acknowledge that the work to stand up council chambers in a hybrid model is ongoing. It's started. I see my colleague Marty Mulholland's here. If she wants to address any of those, any of that activity, we certainly can. But I think where we're at is the recommendation that we continue in remote and concurrently develop chambers to host hybrid meetings at a future date. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heinrich. Any questions or concerns from council? Or anything to add from other staff? Okay. Okay, so yeah, the landscape changed drastically in those few weeks for the worse. So unfortunately, that's simply where we're at this time. But obviously, those discussions will continue as we receive further information or direction. So thank you very much for that update.
Thank you.
If there's nothing further on that item, we will move forward with the next item before us this afternoon, which is Agenda Bill 23091. So the subject is opportunities for public engagement with the City Council. During Committee of the Whole, the full council will discuss opportunities for public engagement. The overall aim is to improve communication between community members and council members and increase transparency. The discussion will include reflection on existing opportunities as well as exploration of new opportunities for public engagement. The council will provide direction as needed. And so this item was brought forward by me, and I just wanted to one, thank members of the public who have been providing feedback through Engage Bellingham and through email and other avenues, and also highlight that the council memo included in the packet for this afternoon's discussion was written by me, and so it's a council memo and not a staff memo. So just to highlight for the public as well that this is really an internal discussion by council to discuss with respect to council meetings and opportunities for council to engage with the public, sort of where we go from here. And so in addition to the memo, which I want to obviously discuss the proposals more at length with the full council, I just wanted to highlight that the timing of this on the heels of what happened with YouTube and the suspension of videos and other is unfortunate, but actually unrelated in a lot of respects. So when I took over as council president at the beginning of this year and was elected by the council to serve in that capacity, one of the things that I was very passionate about was public comment. And I wanted public comment to sort of be unhampered in lots of respects, for it not to be limited to 15 minutes, to allow, members of the public who came and wanted to speak to be able to speak. And so we spent about 3 months with basically public comment going until everyone who'd signed up had an opportunity to speak. And the reality is that there's a friction or a tension just logistically between how does the council do its due diligence to complete the city work that's really on our agenda every time we have a regular meeting, and hearing reports from staff, as well as hearing testimony related to public hearings that are legally required. And how do we, as individuals, right, come to the table to do that work and also have the capacity to hear extensive public comment and to be present in that time and really serve the benefit of the council as well as the public in that one meeting. And so the rub had really been that there just wasn't capacity in time and place for us to do all of that in one meeting. And so it was really looking at a temporary hold on things to place it at 15 minutes because that's what was manageable. And so for the next approximately 3 months, public comment had been limited to 15 minutes, roughly. And at some meetings, we went over 15 minutes. Some meetings, there weren't additional speakers signed up to speak. And so that carried on for about 3 months. But that has not sat well with me because it sort of strikes against just how strongly I feel about public comment and that opportunity for engagement with community members. And the 15 minutes felt sort of, perfunctory in the respect that then you have the first, if it's 15 minutes and each speaker has 3 minutes to speak, right? It's the first roughly five people who are able to sign up to speak, who get to speak. And you don't necessarily receive, obviously, input or feedback from the community at large with, varied perspectives on a variety of topics. And so it's extremely limited. And so it doesn't feel like that 15 minutes of comment is really serving the council. I mean, in a lot of ways, we're just checking off a box to say, we're doing it, we checked it off, and now we're going to proceed with, the rest of city business. And it doesn't serve the public, I don't believe either, because it's limited in such a capacity. And so all of those struggles ongoing. Then we had the issues with YouTube and suspension. So the suspension then of public comment from meetings really was a difficult decision, but also, as I'd mentioned before, sort of a pause rather than a solution in trying to use that time to come up with better solutions and better options and opportunities for engagement with the community. And so this is bringing forward some thoughts and proposals of what we could do or where we can go from here. And really what I'm wanting to explore further is what could it look like to have a separate time and place when the council or select members of the council are present just to hear public comment. And part of the idea is that that's something that, unfortunately, as we've heard, we're going to be in a remote setting for the unforeseeable future at this point in time, but something that could go forward from this remote setting to then when we're in chambers. And ideally, I think broadly, like beyond chambers, is this something that we could do then at different locations throughout the city that maybe we rotated? We have 24 neighborhoods in the city, and we could, when you talk about meeting people where they're at, right? Could we hold public comment at in a particular neighborhood or at a different location, and trying to just provide additional opportunities and making that accessible. So the opportunities obviously are endless, and we could discuss that at length. And so what I was bringing forward was one proposal that I had been wrestling with. And so really there are two aspects to this. So included in the memo, having sort of discussion of general public comment periods. They could be called other things, coffee with council or whatever that might be. That would be held at a separate time and place when we are committed to just hearing comment from the public. And then the second is related to a broader sort of town hall type meeting where, and again, that could have another name. But the idea there is that it would be topic specific and something broader in scope, where we would have the full council present, and it would possibly have presenters or panelists depending on the topic, but the community would be coming together to speak on a particular topic of concern or interest, right, in the community. And so I guess we would take them in order possibly, but thinking about public comment periods as well, I just wanted to make one final reflection point on that, is that I really see the general public comment period as a time when, right, community members can come and speak about really anything. There's no topic restriction. But then from that, what I foresee is that certain things would resonate, right, or come to be highlighted, where then as council members, we may say, okay, this is an area that's continued to be mentioned or something that we need to spend additional time or focus on. And potentially that could result in a town hall setting, a topic of particular interest that's been highlighted by the community, or it could be brought into the fold of our regular meetings in the form of a public hearing. And so public hearings are things that, we're legally bound to hold in some capacity in some respects, but also public hearings are something that the council can use as a tool as well to bring forward community feedback on a particular topic. So we could hold a public hearing at our own discretion on a particular topic if we wanted that to come forward during a regular meeting, and then be sort of on the record in that formal capacity. And so really I'm coming for you today to start this conversation in hopes that we still have 4 months left in this year, so a third of the year, that we can change course to do things a little differently and try it, right? We don't know what that will look like or how it will go, but just to get things started. So I see Councilmember Knudsen first and then Councilmember Vargas.
Yes, thanks for bringing this up, Council President. The 15-minute public comment period has not been in good shape for many, many years. It hasn't only been this issues and the issues we've been going through, but it hasn't been adequate time. Sometimes they went for 3 hours, sometimes they went for 2.5 hours and that sort of thing. And I agree that we should try something town hall like. I think I did a whole bunch of them my first 2 years. A lot of them weren't well attended at the end, but I think now with all the issues that are going on, I think they would probably be better attended. So I would suggest the town hall setting, maybe every 3 months or once a month or whatever. But I would caution as of right now for us to go back and resume public comment, because I'll guarantee you the first meeting we're going to get flooded with the anti-vaccination people. They're everywhere in town. They're on our email. They're in front of the hospital. They're downtown. They're going to flood that meeting, and we'll get in trouble with YouTube. So I don't think we should resume that again. But any kind of town hall or whatever you want to call it, open comment night, whatever, that would be a better avenue.
Councilmember Vargas and then the Lindquist.
Thank you. Great discussion. Obviously been on everybody's mind right now is how do we manage public comment? Because I don't feel it is serving the purpose for which it was intended when it started at this point. Couple of things. In 2016, when I was president, we tried this in a similar venue or similar avenue of doing town halls, which we agreed to do 2 a year. We did one. Which was very difficult to manage. Our assistant at the time found it quite overwhelming. So in regards to the logistics, et cetera, and that was just one meeting. So I think that those are the kinds of things we have to talk about. But also, I also want to bring up something in that, when I started 8 years ago, people came to public comment or they sent emails in, et cetera, and there was a certain level of communication. Now that communication is like multiplied 100. So in regards to whether people can communicate with us or not, emails, phone calls, on our Facebook, postcards, it's not like people are not communicating with us, and we are inundated. And I realize that is our job as a public servant, but we receive a lot of communication. And these are part-time jobs, which we have a very low salary for, and it does not compensate for our time. And so now if we're going to discuss having more public meetings and more town halls, I think we should also consider the fact that the amount of time that we invest right now just trying to communicate with the public who communicates to us is at times overwhelming. So I don't know if this will reduce the level of communication or will also increase that. But I think that is something we have to consider, is the amount of commitment it takes for many of us who have another job while we sit on this council. So if we're going to look at opening things up like that, we also have to look at what this takes in regards to the council members' times. And I know it's like almost seems taboo to have that conversation, but that's reality, is how much time it takes to communicate with the public right now as it is. So I just want to make sure that I think public comment is important, but I think that it has been hijacked right now. And I don't feel it's serving the purpose. And I think if we're going to have this discussion, we also have to talk about what this means in regards to council members' time and commitment and compensation.
Councilmember Lillquist and then Anderson.
Actually, Pinky provided a really nice segue. I've said it a number of times in places before. The idea of a part-time city council is increasingly outdated as the city grows in size, grows in complexity, the scale of the issues, the numbers we talk about, the range of the issues that are talked about. Part of me is really excited with that. And I love that. It's part of what I like about this job, frankly. I also believe that providing opportunities for public comment has been making our meetings less productive. We come to the meetings towards the end of the meetings with less energy. And so I appreciate, and I'm willing to try, I think it might work out really well, the idea of having a separate public engagement events in addition to or instead of at the city council meeting. But what Pinky said is true. This is a sign of the increasing significance and workload to do this job well. And so I'm going to vote in favor of adding to the workload. And I think just we need to look at what that workload is, understand that the county council, for example, has apparently now a much higher level of compensation than the city council. I don't know what their workload is over there. It's probably pretty similar. I just think to serve our public well, we have to give it the time that it needs. And right now, 15 minutes of public comment is not the time that it needs. And I also really appreciate Pinky pointing out the last time we did the town hall. I remember that too. I remember we were going to plan to do 2 of them. And after one, we were exhausted. Part of that was that the administration at the time didn't offer that much support simply because they had already fully booked out their workload. They weren't expecting to have to staff a significant public event, and so it wasn't anticipated. It wasn't planned. If you do go forward with town halls, and I like that idea too, we need to realize that it's not just going to put extra work on our city council staff, but there'll be administrative support as well. And so the administration, I think, needs to be included in that. So there's good understanding of what sort of support we might need to do this. So I think I pretty much covered the same territory Pinky did. And I'm supportive of both these ideas, trying them, as soon as you think we can work out the details.
Councilmember Anderson, then Hamel and Hutzman.
Thank you. I pretty much could echo everything that was stated, and had a conversation with a council member yesterday about the need for support. Currently, communication does take a tremendous amount of time. And for me, when you get 100 emails a day or every other day, and then for a while we're getting a couple hundred, it's really difficult to get through and get responses to people. And city council is part-time. And I know all of us are on either 6 or 7 boards and commissions on top of council. And those are additional meetings outside of what's happening here or outside of what we have with staff in order to work on things. I have 5 legislative things that I really want to work on, and I can't get to them because of the amount of research and time it takes to write that and get that in front of council. And so one of the things I talked with another council member about is we need to have either staff or city council has to be full-time. And I'm not advocating council is full-time, but I'm working full-time on council. And I love when people say your 6-figure salary, because we don't really get paid. I don't even, to be honest, make minimum wage based on the amount of time I put in. And it's not about the money. And I know people are going to say, oh, Anderson doesn't think she gets paid enough, because I didn't come in with the thought that this was a paycheck. I came in with the thought of how best I could use my skills to serve the community. And I'm not getting to those things that I really valued and hold dear that I want to be able to accomplish on council because of how much communication it takes. This upcoming week, I have coffee with 7 different community members who have reached out to me about all different kind of topics. And I always envisioned I would have that opportunity. We're all outside masked and doing our best with COVID, but I do like the idea of a town hall. But it's an additional meeting and it's a lot of work to get scheduled. And because it's going to happen, quarterly or however we decide, it's not very timely. As a community member, when I was on a neighborhood board, one of the things that I so valued was the ability to come in front of council during the public comment period and bring something to their attention that was really important to York neighborhood. And they weren't things that were on the agenda, but often these things we were able to speak to, lobby around, and eventually we got it on agenda. And if we're just, I think back to the listening sessions, we spent, our council break meeting once or twice a week to have listening sessions with the community. And then we get a lot of complaints that there wasn't dialogue going back and forth, and they just kind of felt in a way that we dialed it in. And I know a lot of us, we took down copious notes, we listened intently, we took a lot of things to heart, but basically it was listening sessions. And I don't want to do listening sessions because people will feel that there's no engagement and they're not hearing from us. So town halls are great, but I just don't think it happens frequently enough. I really like the idea, if it's feasible, that before council, maybe council starts at 7:30, but from 6:30 to 7:30, we have an hour that, open mic, people can have, 3 to 5 minutes to just talk, let council know what's going on, what their concerns are, things that, really matter to them, because the frequency of being able to do that a couple of times a month, I think has value. If we're going to go to every Monday, basically, if we did 2 public comment periods on our off council months, I know for me that impacts my day job, and I'm going to have to reschedule things. And again, we're getting into that, and I'm willing to do that. But we have to kind of consider what is that amount of time and those extra obligations for especially council members who work full time, or their parents and they have kids in school, or they're full-time college students. I mean, a lot of us are balancing a lot of conflict of time. So I'm sure I'll have more to say, but I'll let somebody else speak.
Councilmember Hamel and then Husband.
Yeah, I'm not interested in either one of these options, quite frankly. The level of toxicity that we've experienced, I feel like I'm in an alternate reality right now that we are even having this discussion. The level of toxicity that we've all have received that's in our homes with our partners, our spouses, the things that were directed at us that were wholly not supported and not true. And then the subsequent hijacking of the anti-scientific folks who have threatened the loss of our YouTube access now. I don't know why we wouldn't invite more of this. It doesn't make any sense to me to do that. And my company went for 20 months with zero revenue, nothing. And the only money that I lived on was a council stipend, which is basically nothing. And so I'm just not interested in adding more to the workload for the same level of compensation. I'm not coming in here as some kind of mercenary that wants to make a lot of money off of government. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to try to make my community better and to try to help people and to help people that need the help the most. And so I will not accept any further. I don't want that. I don't want to be yelled at and told that I don't care about people. That's just wholly not true. And I don't want to sit and listen to people who argue against science. I got my vaccination as a frontline worker for the food bank. I volunteered for the food bank for the last 16 months so I could help neighbors. And I got my shot back in March. My DNA has not changed. I cannot fly. I'm not a werewolf. None of those things, nothing has changed. And so to sit there and listen to that for hours, I don't know why we would want to invite more of that. That it makes no sense. And people are hurting and they're dying in our community in part because people aren't getting vaccinated. And so I'm not supportive of inviting any more of that. And I'll stop there.
Councilmember Huffman.
So I think one of the aspects of our job that people really appreciate when we're doing well is being accessible. And I think we're having another really big discussion here, which is how to be good at our jobs with the workloads that we have, which is real easy to do this job at 40 hours a week and still not feel like you've gotten everything done that you'd like to do. So, and not gotten back to all of the emails that you'd like to answer. And I know some of you are sometimes working 40 hours a week. So, but it's hampering our ability to be accessible as well. I'm open to trying these. I think that, Councilmember Stone, you're trying to problem solve here, and these are some options that could work. I would be willing to try these perhaps on a trial basis with maybe an endpoint where we reassess and see if these solutions are having the effect that we were hoping for them to have. I'm really interested to see what this different format for public comment would do to the type of public comment that we get. Potentially, we might get more quality public comment that does result in ideas and inspiration for a town hall or further discussion. I don't know, but it might be worth trying. So I hear the potential downsides of the town hall meetings being a heavy lift. And so maybe, again, going into that with, can we do it well? Can we do it in a way that isn't sucking the time and energy from other things that need to take priority? But I'd be willing to try it. I think maybe setting a date for reevaluation might be a good idea.
So I wanted to respond just briefly to a couple of themes. One is surrounding workloads and budget and resources for the council. And just to say that those conversations are also happening internally, and things that will be coming forward before the council in the coming weeks for further discussion. So that piece is obviously connected and related, but not for in-depth discussion at this time, but that will be coming forward. And in addition, the other theme is just about communications. So email communications, the huge packets, right? This week, double-sided, we get it Wednesday for a Monday meeting, right? How that balance, right? How we strike that balance between staff workloads and what's happening, as well as council initiatives, as Councilmember Anderson spoke to, and work that we want to bring forward as well. And so that communications plan and thinking about emails and how we can be more efficient and responsive to benefit, the council and staff, as well as the community, to do a better job. That's coming forward as well in a separate discussion specifically related to communication. So just to know that those are, things to come, and obviously they're connected, but if we're able to, for this item, to focus, I understand that a town hall, some experience in the past by council members said that could be a very heavy lift. I wouldn't do it just for the sake of doing it and checking it off the list. But if there was, a topic or a need that arose where we felt like that would be beneficial to help improve our work as well as meet community needs, then wanting to consider that. But I guess more immediately to focus on the public comment. And I appreciate the concerns that have been raised, but what I would request, and there are a couple of reasons, I guess, why the items highlighted in the proposal were presented as such. So the idea is that it would be with a frequency with which community members would be able to speak to council as they did at meetings, but it would be on an off week. That could be a Monday, it could be another day of the week. That it would maintain a 3-minute speaker limitation, but the topic obviously would not be specific. And following through on, First Amendment rights, as well as, only being able to implement viewpoint neutral restrictions. But the idea is that there would not be a quorum of council members present. And so that this would be on a sort of a rotating basis. My proposal was that the president. I'm putting that burden on me right now since I think this will be a trial basis, and I'm currently sitting as president. So saying I would volunteer to be at every one of those public comment periods and to then report back, right, to the council at the following meeting as far as, sort of how many speakers came, what the topics of interest were, but just a general report out, but having that be not a quorum and a maximum of 3 council members present, and that those other 2 council members would rotate through to hopefully, limit that additional time and need for juggling, but also to keep us out of trouble as far as having a quorum present for other reasons. Obviously needing it to be now virtual, but hoping that this would be something that would be in person. And my proposal was for it to not be recorded. And I know that there will be individuals who take issue with that and feel like it should be recorded and it should be shared. I believe that there are ways in which the community is able to provide comment that is public, meaning shared with the broader public through social media. We see that every day, as well as on Engage Bellingham, that website, that is a format that the council is currently using to accept written public comment where other community members can see those comments, like them, provide additional comment. They're also able to share those comments on their own social media web pages. And so I feel like that piece is being met, but the piece that I'm hoping that this comment period would provide is really the ability to sit down, I'm hoping one day in person and not virtually, but in person where you're able to see someone's face, right? And make eye contact, and there is a power to, right, hearing someone's voice and being able to share those comments in person. But ideally that being a conversation, or at least an opportunity for community comment to come forward that's in a space where those present are the ones who are present and who are speaking or listening at that particular time. Because I've also heard, right, feedback from community members who say, I'd like to come and, speak before council, but I don't want to because I too feel, intimidated, or I don't want, to be speaking to sort of this broader audience. I just want to be speaking to council. And so trying to provide that, more of a more intimate setting in that respect for people to come forward. And also trying to minimize the burden on broader staff. So I believe that this is a responsibility of the council. So when we talk about council work, right, it's a delicate balance when I talk about regular council meetings and the fact that those council meetings need to be dedicated to city business, right? Conducting city business. But at the same time, our council business and our council work as council members and elected officials, part of that has to do with community engagement. And so not wanting, though, to burden the staff, which was not elected, and they are part of the administration and doing their job, to not have to be, right, present at those meetings for the entire meetings if they're hour last for hours. And so that generally, I guess, taking the first one as far as public comment, if there would be support by a majority of council to try that on a trial basis between now and the end of the year. And we could reassess, in January with the, when we have our reorganization meeting, and obviously there'll be a changing of hands potentially at that time. But if there would be support to try that. And as I said, I'm seeking to have, at least ideally 3 council members present at each of those comment periods. And at this point, unfortunately, they would be virtual, as we've heard in the previous agenda item. So I don't know if there are additional thoughts. Mayor Fleetwood.
Sure, I would just comment. First off, I appreciate your efforts, Council President Stone. Some variation of this dynamic has been going on, as Jean referenced, for a long, long time, trying to balance these things out and get it right. And we all inherit the reality of dealing with these issues about public comment and community engagement in the age of COVID. And it just complicates everything on so many levels. I just want to say, as it relates to the quarterly meetings, in the event council chooses to do that, And if it's, I guess it wouldn't technically be a pilot per se, but if we make that effort and see how it goes in the coming months, you can rely on some adequate level of staff support for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor Fleetwood. Councilmember Lillquist.
So I heard you basically asking for something like a motion on your first proposal, and I respect, what Councilmember Hamill had to say, but I'd like to make a motion that we initiate on a trial basis proposal number 1 in Councilmember Stone's memo.
Councilmember Vargas.
I'm wondering if there is a way that we could possibly amend that slightly. Is that I'm a little worried about going ahead and starting a new pilot of something without addressing the big thing we've been talking about, is lack of capacity and how that affects the work that we do. And I kind of feel like that should almost be addressed first. So if we're going to support a motion, I want to know that we're also going to be addressing the amount of work commitment and compensation for that. So either we include that as part of the motion, or we wait until we've had that discussion before we add something new.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I will also support the motion that Councilmember Lillquist brought forward. It may mean that I don't bring forward a proposal I want if I'm tied up for more evenings. I think public comment and hearing from our community is extremely important. And as I said, I know as a neighborhood president in the past that I greatly benefited by having the ear of council members and being able to get up in front and speak. And I know there's multiple ways which we're all experiencing the public comment, whether it's through email or phone calls or, social media. Which I find myself increasingly less spending time there because of just not enough time. But I would request that we try to keep it to Mondays if we go forward with that, because I know it's just 2 additional council members, and I respect those who would not want to participate because of time. But for me to be able to participate, it would have to be on Mondays, and I would make the commitment to participate on all of them if there was not, a second and third to participate with you. But I do support Councilmember Vargas' thought. I think we can start this as a pilot. And if it looks like something that's really going to need to go forward in the future, we need to take a look at time obligation and compensation or additional staffing in order to be able to do some of that lifting of research and, assisting us with writing our legislative pieces we want to bring forward. It's got to be one or the other, because the idea of council is that we are the legislative branch. And given the amount of work that we respond to from that's come through the normal channels of the city, but as you mentioned, that's the book, double-sided, that we had to go through, almost 500 pages. I picked mine up on Friday. So that was my entire weekend, was going through this, being prepared. Anyway, so I think pilot program, wonderful. Let's do it. I think our community deserves to be able to have our ears and our attention more than once every 3 months. But if it's successful in something that's going to continue on, I think as we look coming up to the budget session, working through what the council puts forward, we need to consider what that looks like in order to be able to have the support we need to take on additional duties with our time.
So Councilmember Anderson, just for clarification, you said you would support the motion, but is that a formal second or no?
That's a second. Thank you.
Okay. And is that with an amendment of it being Mondays or is that just a request?
That's a personal request that if you would like me to participate on a regular basis, that's kind of a contingency. If it's another date or another day because it fits other people's schedule, I will do my best to clear my day job schedule to be available if it's in the evening. If it's in the day, I cannot impact my professional job that way, nor my staff. They do enough to give me my Mondays off to do this.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. Councilmember Knudsen, and then Huffman.
Yeah, I will accept. I think it's a good idea to get this started, but I would put a caveat on it. After the first session, if it's nothing but a yell and scream and holler session and attacking council members and attacking this and the anti-vaccination people come out, we give them another forum, I would drop it in a dime and do nothing for the rest of the year and come up with something new with the following year. Hopefully when we get to the point, like they say, maybe in spring of next year, maybe COVID will be on its way out. But to just sit there, I fully understand what Councilmember Hamill is saying. That tears you apart inside and out when you get attacked like that. And if that's what the sessions are going to be, then the sorry thing about that is people who really want to come and comment and talk about things that are relevant to what we do rather than to attack our character. Those are the people that won't come to these things. So I think it's a trial basis, see how it works. But I think we're going to know after the first one which way it's headed. So I'll go ahead and support the motion.
Councilmember Huffman.
Yeah, as Jean said, I feel you on that for sure. I think I just wonder if the nature of this not being a recorded meeting will potentially affect the nature of the kind of comments that we're getting. So I also wanted to point out for most of the council members, this will be an every 6-week meeting. Unfortunately for Councilmember Stone, it'll be an every 2-week meeting, but that makes me feel a little better. That's every 6 weeks. And also, we're not sitting through public comment during our regular meeting. So less likely to have 12-hour days on Mondays than like we've experienced in the past. So yes, willing to try it, interested in seeing how it works out and if it changes the nature of public comment and that it ends up being something productive and positive, which is what I would hope.
Thank you for everyone's discussion. So we have motion on the table related to moving forward with general public comment period on an off council day, potentially the off Monday. That motion made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? Seeing none, I believe that passes 6-1 with Hamill in opposition. Okay, anything further for this? We will table then town hall meetings for discussion. Ideally, I'd love to see one before the end of the year, but not to just have one for the sake of having one. Having one if there's subject matter and a need that presents itself. So thank you all very much for your consideration and dialogue. I know that there's a lot to balance, so I'm appreciative. Going forward, the next item before us this afternoon is Agenda Bill 23044. So this is an ordinance adding a new chapter 6.53 to the Bellingham Municipal Code to regulate third-party food delivery platforms. Council members have received requests from restaurant owners to consider an ordinance to prohibit food service delivery companies from creating an online delivery option for their restaurants without their permission. Listing of restaurants for food delivery without permission creates a number of problems, including posting of menus with inaccurate listings and prices, poor delivery experiences, and operational challenges when order volume exceeds restaurant capacity. council will discuss and consider passing an ordinance to prohibit food delivery platforms from listing restaurants without their permission. And for this item, I will turn to our legislative analyst, Mark Gardner, to get us started.
Good afternoon, Council. I just have a very short presentation. As you know, Council heard discussion about had a discussion about this topic in July, and there was a desire to take a look at an ordinance and consider passage of that ordinance to regulate this activity. And if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and share screen now. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I have a nice and short PowerPoint for you. Just for some context, is pretty well understood already, but just to review for the record, as we know, the pandemic has forced restaurants to go through cycles of shutdown and reopening, sometimes at reduced capacity. In general, it's been very traumatic experience, but one impact that has occurred from that is a substantial increase in demand for delivery of restaurant food, and that helps restaurants in general. And what's happened is that over the course of the pandemic, the volume of food that's delivered over these platforms is about doubled. And people who look at this believe that it will continue to grow, maybe not at the same rate, but it's not something that's going to go away. But one aspect of this was that in a bid to increase market share, a number of platforms started listing restaurants without their permission. It was one or two platforms that did it first, then there was kind of a race to the bottom as the others felt they had to do it to compete. I've even seen some things within the industry indicating that they knew that it had problems and it was causing issues, but they felt they had to do it. So, so moving forward, just to note that there's been quite a bit of discussion about this in media and also in some governmental forums, but the issues that have been identified include these. Some restaurants simply may not offer takeout. Others might not have the capacity to handle demand. Platforms often post inaccurate menu prices or items that don't even exist anymore. And delivery services may fail to maintain food quality, given that it's unregulated and without an agreement. A restaurant with its own program, which is, takes some effort to develop, might be forced to compete with delivery platforms that list the restaurant without permission. Delivery times may exceed restaurant standards, and restaurants have been receiving bad customer reviews after a bad delivery that was no fault of their own. So in response to this, jurisdictions have started regulating this practice and mostly to just flat out prohibit it. Two bans have been passed is the California Fair Food Delivery Act, which prohibits this statewide, and Seattle passed an ordinance with similar provisions recently. And there's been at least 3 temporary bans passed in Washington, D.C., Denver, and Minneapolis. I believe there's some other jurisdictions that are looking at this. Well, I know that there are, but in terms of provisions that have passed, these are the ones I'm certain about, but there might be a few others. Just to then get back to the ordinance, which is in your packet, this is based on the Seattle ordinance, more or less. We did a little bit of streamlining and simplification. So basically in the ordinance, the listing of restaurants on platforms is prohibited without permission. After a restaurant does agree to be listed, if they change their mind, listings must be removed at the request of the restaurant owner within 72 hours. Enforcement is by private right of action. And from what we can tell, the platforms have seen the writing on the wall with this one, and they can't continue to alienate a central partner in this whole business model. So we have heard that there's not been opposition. So we don't expect that there'd be a lot of need for enforcement actions. And in terms of the ordinance itself, when it takes effect, is stipulated as November 1st. to provide restaurants time to reach agreements with any delivery services they wish to engage. And this certainly allows restaurants to do whatever sort of agreements they want to. It just doesn't force them onto platforms without their permission. And that is my presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just stop the screen share so that we're able to see everybody and open it up to council for any questions or motions. Councilmember Huffman.
So since presenting this idea for an ordinance to council, bad faux pas. I've only heard more stories from restaurant owners about how frustrating and the negative impacts that having their menus listed on these platforms has been. Recent stories even of people who've had restaurants who've had old menus listed and the problems with that, on top of all of the challenges with COVID restrictions and right now dealing with particularly supply challenges. It's hard to get ingredients. It's harder than it's been in a very, very long time. And so, the possibility of not having ingredients to make an item is even greater. And then they get frustrated customers who think it's the restaurant's fault. And then you get 1-star reviews on top of the 1-star reviews for all of the other COVID related things that are happening right now, like requiring masks. So I have also spoken with one of the owners of our local third-party delivery service, and they don't have any opposition to this. They already operate with agreements with the restaurants that they deliver for, so this wouldn't change their operations at all. So I guess I will move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Huffman and a second by Councilmember Knudsen. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, well, a question and a comment, but I also talked to a couple of restaurant owners, and exactly what Councilmember Huffman stated is that getting ingredients has been extremely difficult as supply chains have been interrupted and menus are shifting day to day what they basically switch out an item, especially for sides. And so it would be wonderful that they have that ability to make that adjustment so that customers aren't upset that they didn't get something that they thought for takeout. But my question is, this ordinance would go in effect to be enforced November 1st. Is that adequate enough time for a lot of these food delivery services to be able to negotiate contracts with all of the eateries across town? I fully support this, and if that date was looked at and kind of vetted with those companies, I don't want to say any of their names to give them advertisement ability, but if they felt like they could get that done in that amount of time, my only concern is the unintended consequences, that there are some businesses that benefit by this delivery system. And if all of a sudden that takeout line drops, it could impact some of the businesses' viability, especially going into the fall months. So kind of wondering how that date came up and if it's truly viable to get all of those agreements negotiated. And
well, I would have to say I didn't do a lot of research on that. California, when they passed theirs, it went into effect, I think, towards the end of last September, and then they put it into effect January 1st of this year. Seattle had a couple of months wait. I know that the number of programmers that they've got to scrape data and locate restaurants and list them without their permission would indicate that they would have a staff capacity to then actually contact those restaurants. But that is somewhat arbitrary. When we started working on this ordinance, it was July, and of course time flies and it takes a while to get something back to the council, given the council cycle in summer. So we could certainly push it out, say, an additional month, if there's a desire to do that.
Additional questions or comments? Oh, Councilmember Lillquist and then Vargas.
Well, I didn't do the research on this, but I do think November start date is enough warning. As I think Holly said, the writing was on the wall, and companies in other jurisdictions responded pretty quickly. I want to really thank Councilmember Huffman and staff who may have worked on this. It's a really short, sweet ordinance, which is, I think, why I feel comfortable passing it. I can see it from beginning to end, and it appears pretty focused. I think there'll be no unintended consequences. That's important to me. And this is kind of like we've had a number of emerging technology issues, Uber and Airbnb and, scooter rentals, new technologies, and jurisdictions have had to scramble to kind of keep up with them and to properly regulate them if there are problems. This one, I think, is being handled pretty quickly and very well. So I'm happy to kind of check this off the list. The unfortunate thing about regulations is they kind of always speak to the negatives. They tell you what not to do. But what you can do and what you maybe ought to do is try out new business models. If you want to do food delivery service, great. There's an internet out there, and we can do this now. We have the technology. Just do it in, coordination and with the permission of your business partners. And that's how I want to view this, as a positive mandate to make sure that your business partners are included in the activity.
Councilmember Vargas.
I too really want to thank Councilmember Huffman for bringing this forward. A lot of our small businesses are suffering dramatically right now due to COVID that just won't end. And the emphasis on this was to protect and ensure that these businesses stay in business. And for those who are circumventing the system, I don't think we have to give them more time. I think we need to save the restaurants. And that's the emphasis here. So I think November is lots of time for people who realize that they are going around the system to get caught up or maybe do something else. So I think November is plenty of time. If it were up to me, I think we should do it sooner, because I'm worried about some of these small businesses, and that's who I really want to see stay in business and keep people employed in our city.
Councilmember Huffman.
I'd just like to acknowledge Lisa's comment about a potential negative consequence, because that's definitely something I was really searching for when researching this ordinance, is to find those negative consequences. And one that potentially could come up is that a restaurant that has had really good success with some of these businesses that deliver for them, even if there's no agreement, they might really enjoy that relationship and then not catch the fact that they have to have an agreement with that third-party delivery service. And so I think that that's a really good point. I do think 2 months is probably enough, personally, to give those businesses enough time and enough notice. And I think that the third-party delivery services definitely have the force to make sure that those connections happen. I'd like to stick with the November deadline.
Yes, I see Sarah Chaplin's hand up.
Yes, so I was working a bit with Mark on this ordinance and just wanted to bring up one thing related to the delayed effective date and what date. It looks like for the Seattle ordinance, one thing the city of Seattle may have done was devote some resources to doing outreach to local restaurants, particularly through the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, to kind of get the word out about this ordinance to relay any sort of unintended consequence to restaurant owners that may have been relying on these food delivery platforms for business. So I just wanted to bring that up as something that might factor into potential date you choose for if there are no, depending on what resources the city is or is not dedicating here, if there is going to be no outreach done, if that would affect the date. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that additional point. That was going to be one of my questions, is whether there was going to be any outreach or how this change would be communicated to the industry. I assume that the number of businesses of contact would be fewer if we were reaching out to the third-party delivery services. And I would hope that the sort of onus and work would be, on that end to help then communicate with the businesses and put those agreements in order. But or that might be a more efficient way. But obviously, that's not articulated specifically within the ordinance, and so I guess that's up to administrative discretion as far as how that's handled on the rollout. Councilmember Vargas.
In regard to the communication part, I'm wondering if possibly Mark Gardner would have the time to maybe reach out to a couple organizations, not everyone individually, but Sustainable Connections, to the Chamber of Commerce, to the WBA, and just let some of the business organizations know so they could maybe let their members know and help in that outreach and communication part.
I could certainly do that. We could also do a short media release and push it out with our usual social media outlets, which would make a lot of sense.
That would be great. I see some head nods and thumbs up. So additional questions or comments from council? We have a motion before us from Councilmember Hutzman and a second from Councilmember Knutson to approve the ordinance as presented. Seeing nothing further, I will call the question. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Anything further on this item, Mr. Gardner? Anything else that you need from us?
I don't believe so. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you again to Councilmember Hutzman. So the next item before us this afternoon is Agenda Bill 22599. This is renewal and extension of an emergency ordinance imposing a moratorium on the processing of applications for detached single-family development in multifamily zone. So on March 9th, 2020, the City Council adopted an emergency one-year moratorium ordinance that prohibits the acceptance or processing of any application for new single-family development in a multifamily zoned area. On March 8th, 2021, the City Council renewed and extended the moratorium for 6 months. The extension is set to expire September 7th, 2021. A 6-month renewal of the moratorium is needed to allow staff the time to complete the Type 6 legislative review process for changes to residential multi-zoned areas. Council will conduct a public hearing on draft regulations on September 27th, 2021. The moratorium extension ensures land designated for multifamily development will be preserved and utilized at appropriate densities. And for this, I will turn it over to Kurt Napfeld with Planning and Community Development.
Thank you, Councilmember Stone. Really don't have much more to add to this. Just an update. Council did pass and has extended this moratorium in the past. It does expire on September 7th. So in order to ensure we don't lose everything that we've gained over the past year and a half, it's pretty important for you to pass this extension today. We did get through the Planning Commission with draft rules and regulations. They made a recommendation and will be forwarded to you for that upcoming public hearing on the 27th. Staff's been working quite hard on this ordinance, and we believe we've succeeded in accomplishing some of the goals that council set out for us. So with that, we're just recommending that you renew and extend this emergency ordinance, and it is passed as an emergency ordinance.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hamel.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made by Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Any further discussion or questions? I just wanted one follow-up, I guess. It sounds like you alluded to this, Kurt, but that, so with that public hearing coming forward on September 27th, are we cautiously optimistic that this would be the last extension needed, or?
Yeah, that is definitely the hope. Obviously we'll have some work sessions after the public hearing on the ordinance with council. But because this project includes amendments to our neighborhood plans, there's language in the neighborhood plans that are changing. This is being considered as part of our the 2021 docket. So ultimately what will end up happening is we'll go through and you can pass the ordinance and then do third and final with all the rest of the comprehensive plan amendments at the end of the year. So it's anticipated that this moratorium will not go beyond the end of the year and into February as written, and that we'll be able to complete it this year.
Great, that's wonderful. Councilmember Vargas.
Council President, you just addressed some of the things that I was on my mind. So is that I'm glad there's a public hearing. I don't want this to be delayed anymore. I understand that we want multifamily, but we desperately need single family housing in this city. We need all kinds of housing. So any more delays is not helping us. I understand what our objective is, but we need everything to get built as soon as possible so we can house people. So the sooner this gets done, the much better off we all will be. So this would be the last time. I guess it doesn't matter. I wouldn't get to vote, but I was going to say this is the last time I would support delaying this going any further. So I will support it this last time.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from council? If not, we have a motion before us from Councilmember Hamel and a second by Councilmember Anderson to move approval on the moratorium extension for 6 months. Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Okay. And do you have anything that you need further from us? It looks like no. Okay. So we will move on to the next item before us this afternoon, which is Agenda Bill 23093. So this is an ordinance amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget. This ordinance makes several changes to the 2021-2022 biennial budget that could not wait for the forthcoming mid-biennium adjustment. First, or number one, it adds 2.4 FTEs and $304,769 to the Human Resources Department in the general fund to accelerate hiring. The second item is that it adds $319,000 in state grant revenue and $957,440 of general fund expense to replace the roof on the Mount Baker Theater. This was an item considered earlier in the day. And third, it adds 0.2 FTE to the library to convert an existing 0.6 FTE to a 0.8 FTE to support library services. There's no expense budget increase associated with this request. And for these items, I will turn to Deputy Finance Director Forrest Longman.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Council. Momentarily, I'm going to hand this over to our Human Resources Director, Elizabeth Monahan, to speak a little bit more about those human resource additions and why they're needed. But I will briefly go over some of the high points here. That the action adds 2 full-time positions and increases a 0.6 to a 1.0 in the Human Resources Department. If you look at the expenses associated with that in the staff memo, I would just point out that those are for 12 months of 2022 and 2 months of 2021. And then there's the additional professional services dollars in there. Second, as mentioned, the budget adjustment for the Mount Baker Theater, which has a net impact of $630,000 on our general fund reserves after the grant was passed by the Public Works Committee this morning. The bid was awarded for that. So this is just providing the budget for that bid award. And finally, in the library, that is increasing what is currently a 0.6 to a 0.8. That position is vacant. The library is looking to fill that in the coming weeks here, and so wanted to bump that up before that went forward into the hiring queue. So if there's any questions about the technical matters on that, I'm happy to answer them, and if not, I will pass it over to Elizabeth to discuss the HR portion a bit more.
Any questions from council before we turn to Director Monahan? Okay, seeing that, I will turn it over to you.
So thank you, Forrest, for passing that off to me and giving that introduction. And just wanted to say, I appreciated your earlier conversation about the workload and the ability to get your jobs done in the limited amount of time that you have. And I feel like HR is in that same boat where we are trying to support the rest of the city with a significant need to accelerate recruiting, staffing, onboarding, and our classification work. Just as a side note, from the time that I wrote the memo to today, our selection queue increased by 5 positions. I've had 2 department heads request accelerated priority for positions that are urgent to keep the city operational, and 2 urgent needs to prioritize some classification work. So the sum of all of this request is to make sure that human resources can satisfactorily support the city in their staffing needs. And I do have a grand vision for the Human Resources Department on how we can continue to support everyone at the city, but getting those positions filled and using the position to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, starting that off with the diversity piece in the recruitment aspect, making sure that we're getting wonderfully qualified applicants and a diverse pool is going to be essential. And then using that position to really transition then into a more robust diversity, equity, and inclusion program for the city will help us serve the city as best as we can. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? So Councilmember Huthman, then Anderson and Vargas.
Just a quick comment. I'm really encouraged to see an entire position dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for starting off with that in mind.
Absolutely. It's very exciting to me.
Councilmember Anderson, then Vargas.
I was just going to basically now echo the same thing as Councilmember Huthman. I remember during the recruitment process for your position, that was one of my primary goals, was to ensure that HR was set up well so that we could work on equity and inclusion, the bias training, the things that we would like to see happen across supporting all of our staff at the city. So the only way to accomplish that is to ensure that you have the tools necessary to do good work that I'm hoping will come out of human resources over the next couple of years. So, and I was really happy to see that that there was a position that will be dedicated to not only ensure that our recruitment process is well-defined and looking at inclusive measures, but also that we'll hopefully be able to benefit by some of that training and workshops in the future across for all city employees. So I fully support this. So I would move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Knudsen. Councilmember Vargas.
I totally support all the HR needs. We are in dire need of resources, but that's actually not what I want to speak to. I sit on the Mount Baker Theater Board, and I just want to absolutely support the funding for the replacement of the roof. This is one of our historic buildings. It's an icon to Bellingham, and it is direly needed. And the theater board has done a great job of raising all kinds of funds and grants and matching in order to make this happen. So this support by the city to help get this roof replaced is a really important long-term investment for the city. And I just want to say I fully support this and this funding.
Any additional comments? Councilmember Hamel.
So my company does not currently have a financial relationship with the Mount Baker, but it may in the future. So I will be abstaining.
Any additional comments from council or questions? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion before us made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Knutson to move approval and pass the ordinance as presented. So seeing no further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
So that passes 6-0 with one abstention, being Councilmember Hamel. Anything further needed from staff on this item? No. Okay. Thank you very much. So the next item before us is Agenda Bill 23094. This is the 2021 second quarter financial review. So this presentation provides an overview of the city's internal financial statements for the period ending June 30th, 2021. This presentation and additional financial information is available on the city's website. And that link can be found in the packet as well. And to take us through that report, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director, Andrew Esbjornson.
Thank you, Council President Stone. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. All right, can everyone see the presentation slide?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Can you see my cursor as well so I can point things out? That's moving around. Yep. Okay, great. All right, I'll go ahead and get going. So this is the financial update this is the first half of the first year of the biennium. So this is 25% of the biennial budget at this point of the snapshot in time. Quickly on just some other updates before I get into the numbers is we did complete the audit for the city, the financial, the accountability, and the federal audit, and that was completed recently. It was a very clean audit. The exit conference is scheduled for September 17th at 10 a.m. And so we'll make sure that all of you get the Zoom link if you wish to join that meeting as well and hear the details on that audit. So congratulations staff and everyone across the city for doing a fantastic job for another year of a clean audit. So just want to update you all on that one. Another item I wanted to bring to your attention is that we have recently signed a contract to upgrade our budget software. This budget software is a goal that we had, it was in our plan when we came with our budget plan, was to provide an external dashboard. So this new budgeting software will actually allow us to start developing that external dashboard for council members to review, public to review. This will take some time to develop. We need to convert the data. We need to update tables and graphs and get it all working properly. But this is a step forward in being able to provide very current information, the ability for all of you to go through different line items and be able to review the budget to actuals in a timely basis online in your own at your own time that works for you, and offer that up to the public as well to dig into some of those details. So we're looking forward to that being established. Since our last update, and feel free to ask me any questions throughout this presentation. I'll look for hands being raised, or feel free to just jump out and ask me any questions. I know it's been a long day, so I'll try to not take too much of your time. This will be a high-level overview. The details are within the packet, within the details of the monthly report for June. Some bigger items that have happened since the last presentation is the new GO bond of $20 million. You'll see that in the numbers. The ARPA funding for the first tranche of $10.5 million was received. GMT funds of $1.7 million, also in the general fund. And then in the guaranteed deposit fund, you'll see that in the cash line item on page 15 of the packet. We received almost $2 million in the sale for 600 West Holly. That is in the guaranteed deposit fund at that time. It was at the tail end of the month. Now it's been deposited, split between CDBG and the general fund to get that receipted properly to refund the funding back to CDBG of about $550,000. One other item that I know Councilmember Hamel had requested during the last presentation was an update on the housing sales tax. So it's very early on in the housing sales tax that was implemented effective July 1st. And so next month, we'll see more of the full amount of sales tax being received by the city. But currently in the first 2 months, of it being active, we've received just less than a little bit under $3,400. So next month, we'll really be able to see the true impacts of that sales tax. You'll be seeing that in Fund 182 in the future. I just wanted to update you on that before getting into this. Now I will take you more into the presentation, into the numbers. I've continued with the format that you've seen in the past. So revenues are in blue, expenditures are in yellow. The budget is in gray, and the prior year revenues are in black. So here you can see bonds and other. This really has to do with the 38 million in refunding of bonds and also the 20 million new and GO bonds that is in the facilities fund. So that has a big impact on the revenue side. Other items on here of note are down here in charges, permits, and fines. Permitting revenue is off to a very, very strong start to the year. I have another slide later on in this presentation that can show you more of the details on that. Also in here is grants and revenue sharing. This is where you're going to see the ARPA funds of $10.5 million of this big increase compared to the prior year. Transfers are also making a big jump. This is the 4.5 million that was transferred from REIT over to facilities for that Pacific Street buildings as well. So that's the revenue into the facilities fund. Again, very high level. This is everything the city does, all the funds of the city. So hard to glean too much information at this level, but we will dig in a little more. City expenses are at 169 million at this snapshot. Salaries represent about 32% of total city expenses, down slightly from the prior year. We started off the year with the furloughs and the frozen positions. And so we're still seeing the impacts of that and the ability to try to hire and bring people in. We do have, as Director Monahan just said, a bit of a backlog that we're looking to hopefully move through with those additional HR staff. So services, a lot of this has to do with internal service funds. Also, services and capital outlay. These are really tied to the capital plan. If it comes to Nooksack Dam, that is in the services, but if it's a street overlay, it would be services. So there's a combination between services and capital outlay. If it's a brand new asset, it would be in capital outlay. If it's a repair or maintenance, it'd be over in services. So you'll see these big amounts. There's a lot planned on the first year of the biennium on services and capital outlay. We're kind of just getting the start of that with Orchard Street, with Pacific Street building, some of these larger projects. But we anticipate this will continue to grow over the year and into the next half of the biennium. Special revenue funds. So again, this is the same as I've shown you in the past. The shadow boxes are the budget, and then the dark yellow is expenditures. The dark blue is revenues. Street fund has Orchard Street, has West Horton Road, and the Ellis State Street Bridge in the expense category. This is also receiving revenue for permitting activity. Permitting activity, just like I mentioned on the previous slide, is up this year. REIT is off to an extremely good start. It's 66% up from the prior year. The housing market has been very hot, and it's been impressive how high this has been this year. This is really an anomaly, over the previous years on how high this REIT has been. Good for future capital projects. The expense side is really related to the 4.5 million transferred over the Pacific Street building over facilities fund. Dispatch has ongoing project this year, had the internal loan, and also has projects associated with upgrading consoles and other improvements. TBD has a lot planned this year, but still a little bit slow to begin. But sales tax is included in there, and it's off to a strong start. Over here with park impact fees are also included in the park funds, and that is a major driver of the increased revenue within the park funds identified on this as well. And then in the future, you'll see 182 will actually be our future housing sales tax will be included here. Special revenue funds represent funds revenue that is restricted or committed for a specific purpose. And so these are all the 100 level funds, and you'll see the new housing sales tax on future presentations over on this slide as well. Enterprise funds. Enterprise funds, this represents about 38% of overall revenue, 80.4 million, and 77.1 million in expenses, or 46% of almost overall expenses. A big portion of what we're seeing here on the enterprise funds as well are business type activities. So we have external customers associated with our enterprise funds. Big activity here within wastewater is really that $38 million in refunding. It's really kind of skewing the graph in the fact that it was on the revenue and the expense side of 38 million coming in and going out. But water, wastewater, storm are all seeing the impacts of continued developmental service with updated or increased permitting activity. Like I said, I'll show you a slide later associated with that. The Gulf Fund is off to a very strong start, up 91% in revenue on the year as of middle of the year. They were, as we look at these revenues, it's good to remember that when we're comparing to the prior year, we were closed down for a significant portion through April, May. And so some of these, when we're comparing to the prior year, it's not quite of a fair representation of what the actual impacts are. It's almost better to compare to the 2019 numbers. And so looking at parking for that instance, we are down overall, and that's down 44% compared to normal activity back in 2019. So parking continues to be impacted by just the difficulty in getting businesses drummed up again, getting activity again with the Delta variant and other COVID-related concerns. We just don't have the traffic or the parking downtown that we had seen back in 2019. Internal service funds. The biggest activity here is really is kind of the facilities fund is kind of dwarfing all the other activity with $4.5 million transferred in from REIT and $20 million transferred in from or received for the GO bond related to the Pacific Street building. So this is the most impactful activity currently going on in the internal service funds. And that, if anyone's driven by that, you can see the activity just starting there on Pacific Street. And so we do expect that to ramp up through this year as well. Show the internal service funds again, because these are the internal activities. This is that other departments within the city use these activities as these are businesses that is their main customer is other departments of the city. So important to know because that has such a budget impact in relation to what you see to some of these numbers that drive the overall items within the budget. Now I'll get into the general fund. The general fund, again, switching back to the old slide method, the gray is the budget, the blue is this year, and the black is prior year. You'll see here, this is the acceptance of the ARPA funds. We received 10.5 million in the ARPA funds. We also received about 1.7 million in reimbursement and GMT funds. When it comes to the ARPA funds, these are, from an accounting perspective, not earned yet. So the 10.5 million is only earned when we use it. So any of the funds that we haven't allocated or used as of the end of the year will not be reported on the ACFR. It will be reported as grants received in advance. And so something to consider here is a lot of this 10.5, well, all of this 10.5 million at this time is basically unearned until it's allocated and used on projects or specific purposes. So just wanted to note that. B&O tax is up 17%. B&O tax is, if you recall from last year, there was the ability to delay payment of B&O tax until the end of October. And so some of this might be a timing issue where in the prior year, there might have been a delay in payment of B&O. And this year, we're seeing the payment. But when we compare that to the sales tax activity, we do expect B&O to be up, but it might even up as we extend through the year. To compare year end will be the best ability at that time to see the snapshot of how we did last year to this year. Sales tax is up 22% from last year. If you look at the prior year to this year, and I have another slide for sales tax that can show you more details on that, but significant increases in sales tax. We'll get into more of those subsectors in another slide. Utility tax is up. Property tax did have the ability to delay last year as well. There could be a slight timing issue, but this is just the first half of property tax. Other items within the general fund are fairly stable. General fund expenditures are 42 million. The salaries and benefits represent 74% of all general fund activity. This is down about 5%, really related to the furloughs and the frozen positions and the ability to try to get people in the door. So that's a reduction in salaries and benefits that we're seeing in the current year. Services, those are all the services that are being supported. A lot of this goes into the internal service fund, the expense out of the general fund, and revenue into the service fund. All the services that are being provided to the people that work within all the departments of the general fund, and supplies associated with that as well. We'll get into the departments of the general fund. So this, again, we showed this slide in the past. It shows highest level of spend across departments from police all the way down to the hearings examiner. These numbers are in millions. And if the yellow bar is touching the red line, they're right at the budget tracking at 50% of the first year of the biennium. So still, we're only 25% through the full biennium. Fire has had some continued OT that they continue to work on to try to get staffed up. I know they've hired 14 so far this year, and talked to Chief Hewitt. It sounds like another 12 are coming on board next week. It takes a significant amount of time for the fire department to get everyone staffed up and trained really through all the training programs. So it takes a while for them to actually hit the ground and get on the rigs and assist with this OT. Ongoing some of the OT issues, but they are working hard to get staffed up and try to meet those demands. Now I'll get into some more of the economy and some of the other drivers that we're seeing that are kind of the threads through what we're seeing in some of the revenue numbers. 2018, this dotted blue line, this dashed blue line is a normal year of sales tax revenue. The orange line is dash line is 2019. So you can see that standard kind of wavy seasonal activity of sales tax. And then the red, again, this was our COVID year of 2020. I guess we're still in this COVID timeframe, but this was the big dip. This was April and May of 2020 where we hit the big dip and then started to climb out of this as things started opening up again. We are seeing an amazing year of sales tax. We could have never anticipated how much sales tax has grown this year. It is, I'd send you some of the other reports to show you how up we are on sales tax from what we had seen in the prior years. The jump from, if you look at May last year or June last year, this is only almost about $1 million difference in a 1 year, year-over-year span. So hard to say the future or how this will continue, but it will be continue to monitor how our sales tax growth continues. And with that, I have a slide here that shows the North American Industry Classification System. This is generally the full NAICS codes are 6 digits. This summarizes them at a 3-digit codes. It gives you a subsector. And so this shows you the activity that is going on within our sales tax. This represents about 9 million of the, a little over 9 million of the 19.5 million that we've received so far by June of 2021, which is approximately 47% of the sales tax is in these top 5 categories. Motor vehicle parts dealers, again, it's almost unfair to compare to the prior year because there was everything was shut down in April and May, but we see these giant increases of 38% in motor vehicle and parts dealers, 40% in construction and building. General merchandise stores stayed pretty even. Food services increased slightly to 7%. Building materials and garden equipment and supply dealers has increased 21%. These are just 2 of the construction categories. There's also other construction categories that are just not in the top 5. So it's very, it's this gives you the idea of the major drivers within our community of what really drives the sales tax, what's generating that revenue within at least the city's sales tax. And a lot of that driver is right here in the construction activity, which takes me to the next slide. This one, when looking at this year-to-date line right here that's related to 2017, 2018, 2019 through 2021, you're looking at this axis on the right to show you where these amounts are. So this ended through 2021 as the end of June, we were at about 138 million in permit construction activity that's been issued through the permitting department. And so this other side shows you by a monthly total. So what we have here is January, February, March, April, May, and June, and just can show you how variable these different construction activity happens throughout the different months. There's not really a consistent method to it. It just happens to be when there's giant projects or larger projects that can really impact the total overall. And so you can see February was a very big a very big month in 2021 for permitting activity through the permit department. Here, this is then future growth, future construction activity that we're looking at here. If you look at July, we were actually at about 30 million. And so it's continued into July for what the construction permitting activity that we're seeing locally in our community. So big driver of sales tax. I just wanted to share this graph with you all as well to give you some perspective of how we've started the year in comparison to the previous four. Hotel motel tax. This is an area that we have continued to see slowly rebounding. Again, 2018 is in a dashed line. 2019 is the orange dashed line. This is your standard cyclical pattern, seasonal pattern of hotel motel tax. The red is the 2020 and the major impacts that the tourism industry has had. And then the green line now is the return in 2021 as we're slowly rebounding. And here in August, which is actually June activity, very close to 2018, 2019. This is great to see right here. Still concerning with the Delta variant and what else we're seeing out there, how tourism is truly going to rebound, how that's going to impact us on this continued path for hotel motel tax. So I just wanted to show you where we are currently. Hoping for continued growth. Don't know if we'll see what we saw in 2019. But just wanted to share that in more of a graph perspective for all of you. Unemployment is always a key factor as well. Unemployment, this covers the last 2 years. The city or Whatcom County here at the end of June is at 5.4%. Almost very close to what we were actually experiencing back in January of 2020, pre-pandemic. In 2019, we got as low as 4.4% in unemployment, and the nation had the nation actually was very low in unemployment through 2019. And we are just below the national average at this point, but not quite to the Washington state average. But unemployment continues to go down. There's a lot of jobs open. But with the Delta variant, with the unknowns, with the concerns over safety, it's really unclear as to how this will continue and how this will look into the future. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of what we're seeing. Still, so many questions remain out there on what the economy is ultimately going to do, how we'll move from the Delta variant or potential other variants, how the economy will continue to grow, and what the next months will bring for recovery. Our next presentation will be scheduled to be the mid-biennial budget presentation during the afternoon of October 11th. And then from there, sorry, I'm trying to remove there we are. Oh. All right, I'm back. And then from there, the revenue forecast will be in the evening of October 11th as well. And I will be looking to get you the July 2021 financial report out by the end of the week is my goal on that as well. So happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you very much, Director Esperanza. Any questions from council or follow-up items? Councilmember Lillquist.
Andy, thank you for the presentation. I think overall the pictures is looking pretty good, but I still have some concerns. You and I have had a running conversation over the last few months tracking utility delinquencies and also the issue of people who are behind in rent and the local programs in Whatcom County to provide rent relief. Is there anything in your numbers that you're tracking that indicates kind of what that overhang is that might be in people with overdue rents? I know that some communities are already facing eviction problems, not here locally yet, but is there any way you can track that invisible pent-up backlog?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Lillquist. We are continuing to monitor our AR within our utility funds. So with that, they've stayed fairly stable with what we've seen. We've had some customers that have not been able to pay since the beginning of the pandemic. There's other customers that have just been making payments as they can throughout the pandemic. So our ultimate next steps is what we'd like to do is as the utility moratorium on shutoffs is coming to an end at the government level, at the governor's level, that we are looking to reach out to customers. We want customers to reach out to us to let us know their status and whether they're looking to be on a payment plan or how that looks for their household. We are recommending people to seek out assistance through the Opportunity Council. I know they have water assistance revenue that is on its way. However, the program is not up and running yet. And so at times they're not able to really provide the details out to the customers as of this date. They're hoping to have that program up and running in October. October is after the moratorium ends, but ultimately we are not looking to implement shutoffs right away. We want to reach out to customers. We want customers to seek out assistance from the Opportunity Council. Opportunity Council has, I believe they started with the rental assistance program of about $13 million. They also are expecting another approximately $20 million in rental assistance. So there's a significant amount of revenue or available funding for those that meet the qualifications in rental assistance. And hopefully all of them can seek out assistance through the Opportunity Council and get that help. The water utility assistance also is coming through the Opportunity Council. They have direct federal funding directly related to utility assistance. So really that is our hope, that our customers can reach out to them and work with them. Any customers that need a little more time to work with the Opportunity Council, we're happy to work with them to give them more time to get through the process with the Opportunity Council. We're not looking to shut people off, but we do want anybody who has the ability to pay. Anybody who has that backlog of accounts receivable to please reach out to us, make the payments that they can. We do want to work with all of our customers. But ultimately, we do want to get to a point where we can get to a normal state of operations where we don't have ongoing AR, but we do want to help our customers get to that point.
And we haven't been charging late fees or anything like that.
No, we have not been charging late fees. We also are not, through this, we will not be looking to implement late fees right away either. And we do want to work with our customers. There's no point in making a difficult balance to pay larger at this point while we try to get out of this pandemic. So that's our ultimate goal at this point. And AR is sitting at about 550,000, maybe 600 accounts or so. So it ranges from businesses to, there's a lot of rental units. So there's a lot of customers that we don't know who they are. So it's difficult to know if we're reaching out to the right contact. So that's something that we're going to make an effort to do, is to reach out to our customers, those that we can, but we also encourage customers to reach out to us.
Any additional questions from council? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you very much, Directors Burnson. Really appreciate the report, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that the trend continues. But obviously, with the Delta variant and other factors, we don't know completely what the future holds. So probably still a good idea to be, fiscally responsible as always. But thank you for the report, and we'll look forward to more information coming forward. And also congratulations and appreciation to you and your staff for the clean audit and completing that process as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further? That's our last agenda item before Committee of the Whole. So we have, so look back at the date. We have meeting minutes, a draft that was sent out for August, our last meeting on August 2nd, 2021. And I believe, Councilmember Lillquist.
Yeah, I've talked with Elizabeth Oakes. There was a wording in there that wasn't quite clear. There's a minor change on an agenda item to clear up the intent of comments. I can't remember the agenda bill item, but if there's no objection, I would move approval of the minutes with that minor kind of improvement in the language, so it makes sense.
Second.
And Councilmember Stone has seen the language.
Yeah, and I was just going to clarify. So it's agenda item 23072. And the new wording simply stated, focus on improving the crisis response system to meet the needs. So it was just clarification on language. So I believe that motion was made by Councilmember Lillquist and a second by Councilmember Knutson. Any further changes or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? An abstention from Councilmember Vargas. So that passes 6-0 with one abstention. Again, Councilmember Vargas. Okay, and then old and new business. Councilmember Lillquist and then Anderson.
We received notification from the Whatcom Transportation Authority that every 4 years they have to convene representatives from all the cities in Whatcom County to re-examine the issue of board composition. They have representatives on the board from all the local jurisdictions that has to be reviewed under state law every 4 years. They've requested a representative from the city of Bellingham be appointed. I'd be happy to volunteer for that, but Councilmembers Huffman and Mayor Fleetwood are also currently WTA board members and could probably also serve in that capacity. And they'd like to hear from us so they can schedule that meeting. It's on October 14th, so it's a ways away.
I would second you doing that, Councilmember Lillquist, as you are
Excellent.
board president.
I support that too.
Okay. And it wasn't clear if it needed to be a member of the existing, right? My understanding was it needed to be a council member. It didn't have to be someone currently serving the WTA board or in that capacity. But it doesn't look like anyone wants to arm wrestle Lillquist for that position, but I just wanted to be clear. It didn't, in my understanding, at least from the correspondence I received, that it wasn't limited to council members Lillquist, Huffman, or Mayor Fleetwood. So I just want to make sure that opportunity was open to the rest of the council members if anybody had interest in that. And if not, we have a motion and a second for Councilmember Lillquist to serve in that capacity. So if there's no opposition or further discussion, all those in favor will say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that passes 7-0. Great. So I'll follow up on that. Any other items for old or new business? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. So probably about a couple of weeks ago, we were all included on an email from a community member that had concerns about dogs and very extensively long leashes in the park. And they also included the Parks Department, enforcement, and the mayor's office in that correspondence. So I've communicated with the individual and kind of been put into the chain of information. And I'm going to be making a request for staff to make a slight change to a municipal code, but I'm going to read that municipal code so you're familiar with what it is and what I'm going to be requesting. So municipal code 8.04070, restriction on animals in parks. So item B, all dogs must be under control of their owners by means of a leash, as required by Chapter 7.08 BMC. The definition of under control means that the owner, by means of a leash, restraining the dog to the owner's immediate proximity, preventing the dogs from trespassing upon property or annoying or chasing other persons, animals, or vehicles of any sort. Just to refresh, because we do get a lot of emails, the situation was a gentleman was walking his dog in a park, and another individual had two dogs on leashes that were about 25 feet in length, and the dogs were crossing the parking lot and basically harassing the individual and his dog. And technically, because they are leashed, it could be interpreted that they're under control, but based on the length of the leash, they truly weren't, because they were able to harass an individual and their pet. I personally have experienced, and this was probably 10 years ago, up on Patton Trails, an individual who also had a dog on a very extended long leash that was not really under control. And as we passed, they kind of, as the dog was snapping at me, they said the dog's bark was worse than its bite. Apparently not after I had passed, and the dog was able to circle back and bite me in the back of the leg. That dog was even leashed, but not necessarily under control. When the individual talked to enforcement, the enforcement also felt that if there was a length of leash that identified what was considered under control, it would be easier to enforce. So technically right now, it's so vague that somebody could have a dog on a 25, 30, 40 foot leash or rope and be considered under control because they are leashed. But as we know, the further a dog is away from being able to have immediate control, meaning grab the collar and keep them from attacking someone, they're truly not by measure under control. So I would like to make a motion to have staff amend the BMC in order to define by adding under control of their owners by means of and then specify a length of a leash. Say 6, 8, 10 feet, whatever staff feels is applicable based on, typical leash length. I feel that doesn't necessarily mean that individuals cannot have an extended leash. It's just when you are in a proximity of other animals, pedestrians, wildlife, other dogs, that you need to retract that extended leash and have the dog in close proximity to you. So I think hopefully it would be a fairly easy change to the BMC. So hopefully not too controversial or traumatic to bring forward, but I would make that motion.
Second.
So motion's been made by Councilmember Anderson and a second by Councilmember Lillquist. I was just going to confirm with Deputy Clerk Oaks, did you get the gist of that motion?
I did. I wrote that it was to amend the BMC to redefine the leash length.
Okay. And so just for clarification, I guess the motion would be to request that staff bring something forward for council consideration. Is that okay? Director Oliver, I see you on the call. I don't know if you had any addition or wanted to speak to that request.
I would just like to say that we are making huge strides just getting dogs on leashes. And I think that we have no enforcement capability or staffing. We do have these new park ambassadors that are going out and making huge strides, especially in our bigger parks, toward getting dogs and owners on leash. But I think that there are so many other things that I would rather work on than that, but that's just me. So I probably shouldn't. We can talk about it. It would need to go through park board, and I would love to evaluate that a little bit more with the community. It's just that we're just now making strides on leashing dogs, let alone measuring their leashes.
Councilmember Lillquist.
Well, I'm certainly not expecting parks personnel to become the leash police and take, tape measures. But since we are having conversations about leashing dogs, it'd just be nice if we had set expectations, right? Maybe it's part of the conversation is, by leash, we mean, no longer than this, or if it's retractable, make sure it gets retracted. I think it might be part of the conversation, and it'd be easier to set expectations if we just had a number. But yeah, I certainly do not expect enforcement efforts, that measure leash lengths.
Councilmember Huffman and then Hamel.
So I have a dog. I have a dog that is always leashed, and she's not very friendly when unleashed dogs approach her. So I'm very sympathetic to the leash discussion. I wonder. I understand the frustrating thing is that we don't have official enforcement. Our community tries to be the enforcement, I think, either via social media or in person with comments. I also wonder if there is more than just the length of the leash to be analyzed, if there's more updating that needs to be done. This has always been a very frequent comment about leashing of dogs in our community. And so I think it's worth looking into a little bit more, because I know that a lot of community members care a lot about it. When I was campaigning 2 years ago, it was a common thing that came up about making sure that people's dogs are leashed. So I think it's worth the discussion. I do understand that it doesn't feel like a huge priority, but I think that a lot of community members really care about it. So,
Councilmember Hamel.
This does not seem like a city council discussion at all to me. I can't believe we're wasting our time sitting here talking about the length of a dog's leash when we have people who are homeless and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're sitting here talking about an unenforceable item that's not a city council item. I'm voting no on this out of sheer principle.
Further discussion from council? Okay. Seeing none. All in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no?
No.
No. Those abstaining? Councilmember Vargas, did you vote in favor or?
I was kind of struggling. Yeah, I was like, what am I voting? I think I'm going to abstain. I kind of feel like this is really, I know it's important to people, but with everything else, I don't feel like this is a priority. So I'm going to abstain from this vote.
So currently it's 3-2 with one abstention. Councilmember Knutson, I didn't.
I voted yes.
You did. Okay.
Yes.
So it passes 4-2 with one abstention. The noes were myself and Councilmember Hamel. And then members Knutson, Huffman, Lillquist, and Anderson in support, and Vargas abstaining.
Thank you.
Did you get that? Okay.
Yes.
Other items for old or new business? Mayor Fleetwood.
So I don't know if this is something that you want me to give you an update on at this particular time. I know that we're over and time to get into executive session, but there's been a lot of discussion about right-of-ways. And I know a number of you have been reached out to about issues relating to right-of-ways. I think it grows out of the decision that council made vacating a portion of Douglas Street some weeks back. And if you have any bandwidth for it, I thought I would just provide you a little bit of information as it relates to that. Is that okay? Okay.
Nods, yes.
All right. So right-of-ways are complicated. There's a lot of different aspects to them. They exist for the unvacated portions, of course, exist for future transportation needs, but there are maintenance issues, private property and boundary issues that pertain, underlying utility easements, complex title. There's just a range of things that are challenging about this topic. And I just wanted to let you know that there's a few things that we at the city are wanting to do in response to it all. I think you've seen the petition referendum effort that has ignited in the time after the council's 5-2 vote on vacating that portion of the Douglas Street right-of-way. And perhaps for public consumption, I just wanted to lay out a little bit of information that I think needs to be said as it relates to that. First off, the city, of course, did not give away any property because the city doesn't own it. The right-of-ways are easements. The fee simple property is owned by the underlying private property owner. It was suggested that the city agreed to surrender the right to build a paved city street, and we were paid by the property owner for giving up that right. I just want to clarify that the city retained rights for public access and all utilities in this particular case. The suggestion by those that are running the Save the Trails petition might leave people with another understanding of that. Save the Trails, of course, plural, trails, leaves people with the impression that our trail system in Bellingham is somehow in need of being saved. And as all of you know, many of you have worked for many years on supporting the Bellingham trail system, which is one of the best in the nation. So we are requiring the owner of the property, in this particular instance, to improve the existing pedestrian trail to city standards when that abutting property is developed. The pedestrian trail will now be protected and secured by a permanent recorded public trail easement and maintained by the city. Through these steps, the trail that exists there today will be improved and protected in perpetuity. And that's really important to underscore. So we're not removing a trail there. In the future, that trail corridor will be improved. The suggestion also that we're tearing down trees. The city is going to be requiring replacement of any trees that are not retained with a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every one tree that does need to be taken down, we'll be putting up additional ones. Additionally, there's going to be no building or fencing will be allowed that would impede public access through this now vacated public right-of-way. The Save the Trails efforts includes people putting up signage in public parks. We're seeing a lot of signage for the Save the Trails in the 100-acre woods area in Chuckanut. I just want to clarify for unwitting, unsuspecting citizens who are not familiar with this, that the effort to create a master plan in the 100-acre woods, the Chuckanut Community Forest, which the city bought 10 years ago, is completely separate and distinct from anything involving this petition to overturn what the city council did in vacating that property on Douglas Street. There are two different processes. There is presently the beginning of a master planning process to consider what the future needs are of the Chuckanut Community Forest, also known as the 100-acre woods on South Side. Those are two different things. So if I could, I'd just like to talk a little bit about some things coming forward that the city intends to do. As I indicated some months ago when this issue first arose, I am directing staff that they notify my office, the mayor's office, and all neighborhood representatives when there are applications for right-of-way vacations in the future, just to give it one additional, aside from all the additional processes that we go through in an ordinary street vacation, for just one more layer of scrutiny. I'm going to be requiring that happen. Also directed staff to provide a series of council presentations relating to right-of-ways and all the various complex aspects of right-of-ways, how they're managed, what are appropriate city uses of these right-of-ways, et cetera. And so we're going to have robust conversation and presentation by council, by staff on right-of-ways generally beginning in October. I think the first one in a series is going to be on October 11th. And additionally, further directed staff to include a process for assessing unimproved right-of-ways as part of the update to the pedestrian and bicycle master planning process, which, as some of you may recall, is presently scheduled for 2022. And this process will include public input and community discussion about priorities for future improvements in right-of-ways. Through that process, we will have a plan in place where we've been able to, will have been able to identify important right-of-ways for community use that might be alternative to sort of a conventional street or a sidewalk. Because it's important to emphasize that right-of-ways are important and have important public values. And so I think through this process, we'll be able to capture which right-of-ways are going to serve the public for something alternative to conventional streets and sidewalks in the future. So I just wanted to emphasize that there's a lot of important things that are coming forward. You heard today about the urban forestry master plan. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for this assessment of right-of-ways to be considered as it relates to the urban forestry plan that's going to be coming forward. We're going to gather a lot of information in that effort that's going to inform how we use public unvacated right-of-ways in the future. Parks and greenways planning will continue to include future use of right-of-ways that are necessary to serve the public park system. So just my effort to point out that a lot of good things are going to be coming forward that have grown out of the experience we've had on the Douglas Street vacation, and a number of processes that are going to better allow us to vet their value and future uses as we go forward. So just that brief update of some additional things that we're intending to do as it relates to right-of-ways in the future. Thank you for letting me give you that update.
Thank you very much, Mayor Fleetwood. Any further items for old or new business this afternoon? There will be another opportunity this evening if you think of something you neglected to bring forward this afternoon. There's nothing further at this time. We will be moving into executive session, and this afternoon we have 3 items before us. The first is litigation, Young versus City of Bellingham. That will be with Bundy for approximately 10 minutes. Second item is litigation, Hanlon versus City of Bellingham. That will be with Miller for approximately 25 minutes. And the third item is litigation, Lev versus City of Bellingham with DiGiulio for approximately 30 minutes. So we will adjourn and reconvene this evening at 7 p.m. I would just ask for a brief recess while we refill water and perhaps use the restroom before beginning executive session. But to the public, we are adjourned and see you all soon. Thank you so much.